And good morning, everybody. Hi, David Cross back with you again. And it's been a while, at least a month. Real life caught up to me and had to take some time out and take care of a few things. But during the mornings and evenings and things, I was very busy and working on some other programs. And so I have gone back and circled back around to one of my programs that I had done a video previously, which was the MAC address OUI viewer, which, if you remember, was a way that we could open up OUI files or manage OUI files that were effectively lists of MAC addresses that we could then pull up and check against for the vendor association to a MAC address that we discover in DHCP or on the network and so forth. And so this tool just gave us a real quick way to filter in on the types of devices, grab the MAC addresses, see what the prefix is in that list, and then be able to do some searching on that information and to be able to cut and paste, and it would effectively modify the MAC address for you and do the things necessary. So nice handy little utility kind of to keep on the desktop. And this particular application was a standalone. So it wasn't doing any type of server functionality or interfacing into the MAC address Node-RED workflows that I had built that I'm going to kind of revisit here shortly. But it did have a standalone and ability to load the file locally and to download, etc. Well, I decided to extend that. I had worked with a customer and some questions came up about MAC address allow and deny pools for DHCP servers. How to manage those through the BT Diamond IP control solution, and how to update that in a way that you can dynamically add, delete, or associate it through an API to make that information accessible, to update the DHCP servers, and to be able to do things in a type of reactive security component so that if you found a MAC address that was doing something on your network, you could pretty much deny them through DHCP almost instantaneously. So I came up with a way to do that and was looking at a few things. And what I came up with was basically an extension to my MAC address program, which I'm going to show you here just real quickly and then backtrack. But it's also a client server function. So I'm effectively making the MAC address tool part of the freeware and the IP control blacklist function in management kind of more of a licensed capability so that we would download the server component and work within those different components. So anyway, this utility will have a 30-day demo that if you download or contact me to download, you'll be able to test this out with your IP control 10.0 instance, 9 or 10. I most likely 8.0 as well because we're only interfacing to the two tables. But I'm going to start with 10 because that's what I've been working on here and just as a kind of a standard statement there. So anyway, what I did, and just to kind of give you a quick idea, is added some functionality for an add, delete, and export. It works within the concept of class names. So when you think about the names that are in IP control, we're looking for information that ties back to the client class, and very specifically the MAC address client class, for those who are following along in IP control. Now I added in a function, which I'm going to go to my Node-RED server, but it effectively allows me to load from the IP control database through MySQL and this API I'm calling to pull back those class names. And then I can simply do a run and export this information, add it, delete it, and then work within the information that's being pulled back. Now, a couple of key things here. One is that this is intended to work only within the CAA or the cloud automation type appliance with Node-RED, and it's only to work within the workflow that I've designed and or you need to create your own to return the fields that are expected. But in this case, I have a specific API endpoint, which I'll call regmat. Now, what we're going to see here in this particular export function that I've provided is that it's effectively pulling out the MAC addresses that we've collected, the type of condition that's set up for the match of the MAC, which in this case is exact. And the benefit here that I'm providing is I'm doing a lookup on the MAC address table based on the MAC vendor list being populated when I run this export, add, and or delete. So just to kind of give you that framework again and view again, if I were to run that export without the MAC address list, you'll see that the vendor is not populated. And then if I load that OUI table and or download the newest one and then run that again, I should get a vendor list tied back to the MACs. Very simple, very straightforward and helpful. And then I have also that you can navigate to the individual MAC and copy those MACs. So if you wanted to then do an add or delete function of that, you can. Or if you wanted to copy all the MACs. So I had it that if you had already exported the list, you could effectively do something with that entire exported list. Maybe a dangerous function, but it does allow you to do an add or delete in bulk, and it'll give you the updates and status to all that information. So very key, very helpful there. And kind of just to go through those lines, I'm going to go ahead and just to run an add on this, which I already know exists. And what I should get is some error messages back, basically saying the MAC address exists. And I'm doing all of the checks and so forth in the Node-RED where all of this functionality is running. And that is then giving me the ability to do a query, check the names, and then validate whether the MAC address is in use before I add it. Now this took a little bit of time because in my Node-RED, I'm actually doing some logging up in this case. So every one of these messages is being logged, and that's kind of slowing down my system. So I'm going to just do one thing. I'm going to deploy this just so I don't have to wait on this when I'm doing the video. So as you see, as I expected, I got some return status saying the MAC address already exists. We really can't do anything with this. However, I can go in and then delete all of these MAC addresses, which I don't want to do at this point, but I will show you that in a minute. Which will then go back in and delete these MACs and then give me a status on each of the individual MAC addresses that were run against that list. So this is very straightforward and very easy to work with. And I found some other benefits of using this as well. And one of those in particular, before I get into the Node-RED piece, is that it allows you to do several things such as exporting MAC addresses. But if I wanted to go in and create additional pools, I could define these as a MAC address type and leave those empty, and then go back to my application and simply refresh this list. And then I should see now that a new client class I've designed, and then get this, I've already exported the information from one tool. Now if I want to go in and then clone this, I can just run the add into the new pool, and this will effectively go out and add all of those to the second pool, cloning the information. So a real quick and easy way to kind of copy information back and forth so that we can manipulate these pools, back them up, do other things with them as necessary for supporting that. So really beneficial little tool there. So I'm going to make this initially available as kind of a shareware download with a 30-day demo, and then we'll initiate a key if you need. So just go to my website, contact me at IPDevNet, and I'll send you a license key, or we'll work that in that you can get the server component here too. So now kind of go over the server component. It's a little bit more complex than kind of what I wanted to end up with, so I will modify this. But I just want to kind of walk through the flow of this real quick and give you an example of really how this works and how Node-RED can simplify a lot of this MySQL and/or access or prototyping of APIs. So to begin with, just some backfiller again, that Node-RED is the ability to work within what they call nodes, these little squares you see on the screen, wiring them together so that you can have sequential tasks or even asynchronous tasks run through APIs or making your own APIs and kind of build a workflow. So you have one task obtains data, you send it on to the next task, manipulating that as necessary, and all the way through the end, returning your response. So in my particular case, I set up just a real simple get API, and I'm running this through a switch node, which I'm going to tell it to get the action, which I support various actions, and this is where I would extend on top of the API, building these endpoint APIs for my use. And I've built 4 different APIs, which will do an add, delete, export, and then also a list, which you saw of the class names. So that just goes out and gets the different class names from the tool. And then what we do with this information is Node-RED will then route the message to the appropriate output, as you see here as I'm highlighting this based on the request. Then what I'm doing is I'm going out, say, as an add function, I'm creating a message topic. So the message.topic is how the MySQL node works with SQL. You send the topic into the SQL node, and it uses it as the SQL commands that are being passed to the database. So I'm making direct database calls here, and I'm using a specific user with this permission to do that. Now in this JSON-ADA expression editor, I'm effectively building the SQL, And this allows us then to take the input payload and extract values that I can then use to construct this SQL string, which in this case, I'm doing this based on an individual MAC. So the payload.mac is where we're looking up the class item value. And then I'm going out and actually telling it to look up the class ID so that I can manage whichever DHCP client class is returned or selected. This then passes that information, and I'm going to do a couple things here too. Let me go over this. And I'm going to copy the payload information coming in up into different variables that I'm going to later use throughout the process, so I can later call on this information to construct the additional packets, such as the MAC, the class name, and the action type we're telling it in the input. So what we're doing, again, I'm going through another switch saying if the record's found, go ahead and exit, because I don't want to do anything here at this point. And it's in the exits that I'm creating a JSON structure that I'm going to use for my APIs to tell me if it's an error or to do any checks in the API. And if it's a new device, we've determined it's not in the database. Once again, we're going to go ahead and set the payload MAC, the class name, and then we're going to generate a new SQL topic, which tells us to insert this new record into the database directly. And we're going to tell all of these, since we're dealing with exact MAC addresses, to use an exact condition, and then it imports it into the utility. So I've done this for several different types, the add, delete, export, list, and then I have one just does a catch-all, because if it's not part of that API method, it is effectively not a valid response. And so we want to return this back. We do catch the errors as well, so that if there's any of the additional calls, login issues, things, then we'll know that we can go back in and check those. So that's pretty much it. However, very beneficial, and again gives you that direct interface into managing these devices, adding, deleting, which I can then do in bulk as well, and really full-time management or real-time management of this information. Now, the way that we populate the data, and actually, I'll tell you what, let me pause for 1 second. Okay, it wasn't a second on your end, but it was here. Just wanted to set this up, save a little bit of time. So I'm on my DHCP server, and I have just extracted out a list of all the MAC addresses, and I literally just want to copy and paste this. So to show you, again, how the tool is going to help you as an administrator, if you're managing these client classes, you can just simply go up and paste that information directly into the tool. And then I can go back in then and run an import, telling it to go out and get that information. So it'll import those records into the new pool, and anything that has an error, we'll see those errors. I can then run the export again and see that information that was there. And again, the tie back to the vendor name. So that's it. That's what I wanted to show you. And again, if you're interested, let me know. I'm going to continue to build this. I think the gradual progression of this tool is then to tie back into some of the other APIs for MAC address lookups for the IP correlation, maybe auditing or something else that I might want to extract out meaningfully that's tied back to this MAC address program. So again, if you have any questions, let me know. And if I don't talk to you soon, I'll talk to you later. Take care. Bye.